this is Erica with Crafts Direct, and I want to show you how to make this super adorable little pendant banner. It's made totally from scratch, so I got to take my sewing machine out, which was super fun, and I want to walk you through the steps on how to make this.
To start this project out, we are going to take our half yard of that cream cone of fabric and iron it and get all of those creases out. Then we are going to move it over to our cutting mat. Trim off the edges. We want to make everything nice and even, and at this point I'm also trimming it down to 18 inches in length. Next we will trim to 12.5 inches wide. Now we are going to create the banner part of the bottom, so we are going to find the center of the bottom, which is 6.25 inches, and mark it with a pencil. Then on each side towards the bottom we are going to measure 4 inches up, and that is how high our banner is going to be. Then we will connect the side mark with the center mark and cut it with our rotary cutter, and then we'll do the same for the other side to create our banner. Now we're going to move back over to our ironing board, and we are going to take the two longer edges of the fabric and fold over 1/4 inch. We're going to iron that down to make a nice crease and then fold it over again. This is sealing in all of those raw edges. Once we've done that, we're going to pin it all in place, rotate the pendant banner, and do the same for the other long side, making sure we're folding it into the same side of the fabric. So again, 1/4 inch ironed over, fold it once more 1/4 inch, iron it, and then pin it in place. Now we're going to do that same process with the banner ends. The only difference is that after we fold the first side over 1/4 inch and iron it, then we're going to move over to doing the other side of the pendant banner instead of rolling it up again like we did with the two long sides. But once we've got it done one time, we're going to go over, fold it in again, iron it, pin it in place, and then take that second part, iron it over that last 1/4 inch, and pin it in place. Now we are going to take this whole pendant banner over to our sewing machine and start sewing it down so we'll have nice hemmed edges. So I already have my cream thread in my bobbin and in my regular thread. I'm going to backstitch at the beginning, and then I'm going to sew all the way down until I get to a corner. Make sure to take the pins out as you go because you don't want to sew over those. But then once I get to one of my corners, I'm not going to backstitch because I want everything to look nice and consistent. I'm just going to sew till I get to the end where I want to pivot my fabric. I'm going to put my needle down. I'll leave it in a down position. And then I am going to lift my presser foot up, pivot my fabric, and then once I've got it lined up again, I'll put my presser foot down and then continue to sew again. Again, no back stitching at this point. We're going to keep doing this until we get to the next corner, repeat the same process, sew until where I want to pivot the fabric, put my needle down, leave it down, pull my presser foot up, rotate the material. Once I've got it where I want it, I'm going to put that presser foot back down, and then sew till we get to that next corner. Once we get to this corner, we're going to do the exact same thing again. So sew until we get to the place where we want to pivot, put the needle down, lift the presser foot up, pivot the fabric, take that pin out, put the presser foot back down once we've got it all lined up, and then keep sewing till we get that long last stretch done. Once we get to the end of this long stretch, we are going to backstitch at this point. Then we're going to take it back over to our ironing board, and we are going to do the same process of folding over that last unfinished edge 1/4 inch, ironing it, folding it over again to hide all of those unfinished edges, and then pin it in place so we can take it back to the sewing machine and sew. Once we get to the sewing machine, we are going to backstitch when we start sewing, then sew all the way down to the other end, and then we'll backstitch again at that end. Now we're going to go back to the ironing board, and we need to create that flap where the wooden dowel fits inside. So we're going to fold the fabric over the dowel and then figure out where we want it placed. Mine was about 1 inch. You could go up to 1 1/4 inches, pin it in place, and then we're going to take it to the sewing machine and sew that little casing closed. When I put my material down at my sewing machine, I found a line that I could follow to keep things nice and even, but as you see me sewing, you can see where the material is underneath it. And then I just decided to sew another line just to make it have a more finished look. So I lined it up with my presser foot, and then I adjusted my needle to the width I wanted between the 2 stitches, and then I just created another seam. And this was just purely for decorative purposes. And now we're going back over to the ironing board. We don't have to iron this time, we're just going to trim all the extra little threads and make sure that our dowel fits into that casing we created. Now we are going to take our pendant banner and move over to a workspace where we can paint. You might want to slip a piece of cardboard underneath your pendant banner because the paint might go through. Then we're going to place our stencil where we want it on our banner and then tape it in place. We are going to tape all 4 sides down because we don't want that stencil moving once we start applying the paint. Next, you'll take your fabric paint, pour a little bit out. You'll notice it's really runny, so take note of that. And then we are going to grab our 3/4 inch stencil brush, put a little bit of paint on it, dab off the excess paint because we don't want any runny paint. We actually want to use a very thin amount of paint, and then start applying it to the stencil. When I do stenciling, I use a up and down motion. It's kind of like a pouncing motion, and I go over the entire stencil. You don't want to glide because the paint might go underneath the stencil, but if you keep it up and down and pouncing, then you shouldn't have very many blurred lines. And when I paint, I typically focus word by word, and I do all the layers I want on each word before I move on to the next one. Once you're all done stenciling, very slowly and carefully peel up the tape. I do this even before the paint is dry, and then I remove the stencil. At this point, you could leave your saying as is, or if you want to, like I did, take a very fine point paintbrush, grab some paint, and fill in those letters where the stencil was. Once we've got everything all painted, you want to sit and let that dry for 24 hours. Our next step is to add the jute to the banner so it has something to hang from. So we're going to take 3 feet of jute, cut it off. We're going to take a little bit of tape again, wrap it around one end of the jute. This is going to make it easier for when we take our 6 beads and strand them on, which is exactly what you're going to do next. So grab 6 of your wooden beads and then slide them on to the jute. Then we're going to cut off that masking tape part that we had on. It's just easier than peeling off the tape. We're going to slide the banner over to the right, and we are going to attach our jute to the dowel. So wrap it around the dowel, tie a knot in the back, then move it over to the edge, leave enough room so that you can wrap it around 3 times. You are going to take a little bit of glossy accents, apply a dab of that to the back of the dowel, and then wrap your jute around the dowel going over where you put the glossy accents. Once you've gone around 3 times, you're going to take that little bit that was left from the beginning and then use that to tie a knot in the back. And then we're going to slide that extra strand inside the casing, and we are going to repeat the same process on the other side. Then, if your string is longer than you want it to be, we can add a little bit of detail by taking the center of where the string is, have a loop at the top, and then just create a knot. This adds a little bit of detail for when you hang it so it doesn't look like just one long big piece of jute. It adds a little bit of a focal point to the top center. The banner could essentially be done at this point, so if you wanted to, you could stop here, or you can join us and add a little bit of greenery to the top. So we took a eucalyptus spray, and we are going to cut it in 2 parts, about halfway down. We're just going to use the scissors to cut it apart. and then we're going to place it on the top of our pendant banner where we want it. We cut it into 2 parts because we wanted the leaves facing different directions. Then we are going to take about 24 inches of jute, cut it, and then we are going to use the jute to secure the 2 pieces of eucalyptus together. So sneak the jute underneath the 2 pieces of eucalyptus, leave a tail of about 8 inches, and then tie a knot. Once you've got your knot tied and secured, then you are going to take the longest piece of the extra jute and wrap it around the eucalyptus pieces. And you're going to do this so there is a centered jute wrap section in the top of the greenery. Once you've got it wrapped, try and get both the strands back to the center because you are going to take these 2 strands, create a knot, and that's what's going to hold the jute in place. Trim up the ends of the jute and then place that eucalyptus piece where you want it on the banner. Once you know where you want it on the banner, you can take hot glue, apply it on top of the jute, and then stick it down where you want it on the top of that banner.
You can find all the supplies for this project at craftsdirect.com and jump over to our projects page.